This was a video so requested that an ancient German emperor came back from the dead to ask for it. This is the final part of the compact claustrophobia modded playthrough, where you begin in a tiny 3x3x3 world and slowly work your way up through hours of gaming, eventually upgrading your world and technology, and making a pickaxe powerful enough to break the world border and escape, using only resources found in your tiny box. But how? Here's a quick rundown of everything that came before this episode. After starting in the beginner 3x3x3 box, punching the walls to obtain useful resources such as dirt, and scavenging through the dirt to get seeds and stuff, I planted several tiny tree saplings, used them to create wooden tools, and used the tools to quote-unquote, mine, new resources, by scraping metal dust out of the walls with stone pickaxes, smelting them, and progressively getting better tools for dust. I eventually had the resources to begin an industrial revolution in this tiny box. After mixing some rare dusts together to make radioactive uranium blocks, a power generator that feeds off radiation, and my first powered machine in the game, I was ready for phase 2 of the gaming. By stuffing rare materials into the machine to process a machine part for a new machine, I made a new machine, which was another 3x3x3 room. And yes, you can basically put infinite new rooms within each other for infinite space. But extra room was expensive. And you cannot simply beat the game by spamming a bajillion tiny rooms. Because the end goal of the game involves getting a bedrock pickaxe to break your way out of the world. But it's a tool that is only obtainable with this 13x13 atrociously complicated machine that you have to build eventually, which will obviously not fit in a 3x3x3 room. So how do we upgrade from 3x3 to 13x13? Here's how. After automating metal dust production with auto clickers and starting a small crop farm in my second room, I began industrializing more in this tiny world. Wood cutting machines, hammers, a sieve to filter hammered stone, sulfur, gunpowder, TNT, steel, blaze rods, lava, new overpowered power generator that runs on lava. On the other hand, I farmed water, sugar cane, paper, restock, leather, conveyor belts, leading up to a metal press. We had already come quite far, in this tiny box. But there was a long way to go. After getting a preposterous amount of metal from the auto clickers and processing it into 4 tiny rooms, you can use the metal press to process the tiny rooms into parts for a small 5x5 room. In this 5x5 room, you can use the extra space to fit in the next tier of machines, which includes a 3x5 crusher. This crusher is the next stepping stone in obtaining the 7x7 room, which opens up a quadrillion new possibilities. After relocating my various mechanisms into this newly acquired section of space, it was time to go for a new ridiculous goal. Neutron fluid. A material that is essential for escaping this prison world. Now you may think that it is impossible to obtain that in a tiny box. But that is simply not true. First I would need to obtain an 11x11 room. The most expensive invention done so far. The first step is to create 6 of these complicated 9x9 rooms first, each consuming several million units of energy and chests of iron to make, and then combining the 9x9 rooms with these several new machines such as this injection thingy and this shrink ray, to make the giant machine. The next step is to go in the giant room and build a 9x9 fusion reactor from high-tech fusion electro-radiance magnet and high-performance technocritical temporal cortex core, and fusion fuel, to get neutron fluid. To get all of this expensive reactor stuff, I would need to set up a chemical factory, as well as some powerful industrial machines to make new parts. So I did that. I created some messy machine chains and complex materials, which was hard with this very limited space, and basically going Factorio mode with stacks upon stacks of steel, metal plates, and very toxic chemicals. With all of the aforementioned items, I built the fusion reactor. Now you may have approximately 100 questions right now. Such as, what do we need neutron fluid for? This neutron fluid will be used to create glowstone without entering the nether, which was disabled in this game anyways. But why do we need glowstone? because it is one of the building blocks for the bedrock crafter, aka the high-impact compactor. A machine that also requires this, and this to build. But for now, we just have the donut-shaped reactor, and a long way to go. Keep in mind that this is all happening within a 3x3x3 world. And that is where we left off last time. So obviously, the next thing to do is to create a second reactor. But why? I am now going to give you a quick lesson on reactors. A fusion reactor requires a massive amount of energy to start up to begin the fusion reaction, which only happens at temperatures rivaling the core of the sun, which in return releases ridiculous amounts of energy, and neutrons, which is neutron fluid. The reactor then needs even more energy to contain the fusion reaction inside this ring, which is done by using magnets, which need to be constantly charged, with the entire structure needing about 400,000 energy units per second. Several hundred times more energy per second than the electricity created by the current weak and pathetic lava generator. Due to all of the reasons above, we need a powerful fission reactor. The issue is, fission reactors are dangerous, and if they are not built correctly, they can explode and leave the area in radioactive ruins, basically ending the playthrough. And they are usually very complicated to design. So I went to this reactor design calculator and had artificial intelligence calculate the most efficient 10x9 reactor, since we only had a 11x11 room to work with. In response, the artificial intelligence website told me I needed this reactor cool and called Cryotheum. So how do we make this so-called Cryotheum? I returned to the factory to create all the parts needed to build a 5x5 fission reactor, following this cheap design. Even though I said I was going to make a 10x9 one, I lied, because Cryotheum takes a lot of energy to make, which we do not have yet. So I started off with a 5x5 reactor since it was cheap as f, and this small reactor will be used to make the aforementioned blue stuff to upgrade the reactor. After stuffing some uranium pellets into the reactor, connecting the reactor to the outside room, and turning on the reactor, the entire power grid of the base was overloaded within a fraction of a second of booting up the reactor. So I manufactured some molten redstone cables, which were an upgrade to these lousy garbage cables. With all this newfound electricity, I began to go hard on these things called electrolyzers. A machine that consumes water and does magic science hoogly-doogly to piss out hydrogen, oxygen, and this mystery material deuterium, which is actually reactor fuel. We will need a lot of these chemicals, so I made 8 of these machines, and speed upgrades. But I had a sudden realization. One buff electrolyzer with about a stack of upgrades was far more effective than 8 average electrolyzers. And the speed upgrades were much cheaper. This was so sad. So I went to go get some more materials after scrapping the electrolyzers. After going to the metal farming area, which consists of 2 auto clickers, some chests, and pickaxes that each mine a specific material, depending on what the pickaxe is made out of. I built and created 96 upgrades. With this super cracked electrolyzer pissing out oxygen at preposterous speeds, it was time to use the oxygen for this method known as the Cryotheum duplication feature. To start off, I extracted experience from my XP bar and poured it into this machine to mix it with snowballs obtained from this refrigerator. Then I plugged all this oxygen into my new chemical factory, where the oxygen is used to crystallize the XP snow into this XP snow icicle thingy, which can be grinded into 2 times more XP snow than before, which can make 2 icicles, and 2 icicles becomes 4 icicles, 4 becomes 8, and so on. Eventually we will have enough icicles to make the 160 coolers needed for the real fission reactor. The byproducts of this process, known as hydrogen, are not useless though. It is used in this into dash material. Now what is dash, you may ask? It will be used for the 3rd most powerful pickaxe in the game, the dash pickaxe. But there will be no spoilers for what it does, for now. Now that the chemical stuff was dealt with, it was time to invent a 13x13x13 room, the largest room in the game. And we need it for 2 reasons. Number 1. To build the ultimate bedrock making machine. Number 2. To fit in the second largest machine in the game. If you watched the first episode, you may be familiar with the miniaturization field, which is a nerdy way of saying shrink ray, which comes in different sizes. Shrinking 3x3 objects was no longer enough. We needed more room to shrink 5x5 objects. Upon upgrading the room to maximum size, which was one of the most expensive and complicated things I've done in the game so far, as seen in this time-lapse, and upgrading the shrinking area, I unlocked several new shrinking recipes. Since animals do not naturally spawn around these areas, statues of certain animals can be shrunk to make it become alive. And I need a living cow to progress in the game. But there was a paradox. To make animals, you need wool, which only comes from animals. But this paradox is avoidable. I made a giant string farm, which involves planting rows of industrial hemp seeds obtained from scavenging through dirt. Now we wait. And farm. After what seemed like years of going hard on those hemp, I manufactured piles upon piles of wool. But the ordeal is not over. Creating life is an art form. And you cannot simply make living things out of blank white wool. You need color. But how do we get color in this desolate world? The answer is farming. After setting up various crops around hemp land, which originate from sifting through sand and dirt, and finally getting colored wool, I used the machine to give birth to a chicken, which I creepily stared at until it laid an egg. This egg is needed to create the cow spawn egg, which needs, you guessed it, another wool sculpture. After bringing a cow to life, for the sole purpose of milking it, I dumped this milk into a barrel and threw in 3D printed mushrooms, causing it to become slime. We are now closer to our goal of escaping this 3x3x3 world. Speaking of world, the world known as Earth's land surface area is 57 million square miles, leading to an average of 5 millisubscribers per square mile. This is so sad. Can we hit 1 million subscribers? Please subscribe. Thank you. After this animal ordeal, I returned to the chemical factory to find truckloads of green potato chips and spicy blue powder. Now we can build the reactor parts to build the ultimate fission reactor from the reactor parts. With this new reactor cube making 20 times more energy, we now have enough electricity to boot up the reactor donut. Meanwhile, I obtained the promised dash pickaxe from earlier. The dash pickaxe is one of the only pickaxes powerful enough to knock platinum out of the machine walls. This aforementioned platinum will be used to create the most powerful cable in the game. The cryo-stabilized flux duct. Infinite energy transfer. Which we needed now. After upgrading the fuel pellets to oxidized fuel, connecting the fission reactor V2 to the fusion reactor V1 with these new cables, dumping all the fusion fuel from the super buff electrolyzer into the fusion core, and channeling all the electricity towards the center to heat it up, it was time for the most dangerous part of the process. After the fusion center gets enough heat, more specifically 8 million Celsius, the fusion begins on its own. Then I redirected the cables to the fusion magnets, which if not done correctly, will lead to the reaction escaping the ring and turning this entire room into a nuclear reaction. Basically meaning, I die. Now, we wait and see if I die. Behold, the functioning fusion reactor. After waiting a few minutes for the fuel to be consumed, I got 4 byproducts: hydrogen, helium, neutron fluid, and tritium. But I could not simply walk away yet. The heat in the reactor does not go away on its own. And if left unattended, the magnets will eventually shut down, turning this entire room into a nuclear reaction. So after dumping coolant into the fusion ring through a coolant pipe, removing the useless helium and hydrogen, and extracting the useful tritium and neutron stuff, and shutting down the magnets to save power, I dumped these exotic chemicals into the chemical factory to produce these 2 things known as 8 tritium lamps and 8 impulse item ducts. 2 of the items we need for the high-impact compactor. The slime from earlier is used to create the 3rd machine part, known as the ultimate energy plug. As for the other 11 parts, they were relatively cheap at this point, except for the superconducting fusion magnets, and a second maximum-sized room. However, The maximum sized room could be obtained for an 86% discount of the old recipe by using the upgraded shrink ray, which consumes less resources than the old shrink ray to make the same thing. But the superconducting fusion magnet was the real issue. To make one of them, I need smelted just cooked wood pulverized into charcoal dust processed into graphite to make basic plating, which is combined with a mixture of lithium boron and steel mined from machine wall, which is compressed onto the plate with redstone. The next step, the most important step, is to put 16 uranium in an isotope separator to obtain uranium-238. Isotopes combine cobblestone from a cobblestone generator with quartz obtained from steel pickaxe mining to obtain granite, which is put into a rock crusher to obtain rhodochrosite, and sulfur and sulfur and uranium is combined with a tier 2 plate to make the tier 3 plate, which is known as Du plating. Finally, use fluoride from putting diorite to the rock crusher and spare sulfur from granite to create a chemical reaction, which is the following: melting sulfur into molten sulfur and reacting it with oxygen to create sulfur dioxide, which is reacted with even more oxygen to make sulfur trioxide, and mixed with water to make sulfuric acid. Meanwhile, the fluoride mixed with water to make fluoride water, which is reacted with sulfuric acid to make calcium sulfate and hydrofluoric acid byproduct, and this sulfate chemical is crystallized into sulfate powder while the hydrofluoric acid is thrown away. This very complicated powder is then used to create crystal binding, which is also made out of pulverized obsidian powder and magnesium, thus obtained from steel pickaxes as well, and rhodochrosite as a byproduct of crushing granite. Last but not least, put the crystal binding and smelted boron dust on top of the tier 3 plate to make the final tier plate, which is used to create the superconducting magnet, which also requires magnesium diboride solenoid, which isn't as complicated as it sounds because it is only made from boron and magnesium and tough alloys. Then, you repeat this process 56 times. Now that was over with, I had all the materials needed to build the high-impact compactor. After dismantling the fusion reactor and shrinking area to make way for it, it was time to get building. Now this is the final part of obtaining freedom. Do you remember the dash pickaxe from earlier? Although it may have passed away by now, it left behind more than just platinum coal pieces, which can be combined into about 70 coals. Now why is this important, you may ask? After creating a maximum upgrade kit and using it on my electric furnace, and installing this complicated sounding upgrade, along with 3 speed boosts, I stuffed all the coal in it until it turned into coal coke, which was much faster than the previous coke furnace. Now it was time to do the math. 8 coal per hop times 3 hop per diamond nugget times 9 nugget per diamond equals 216 coke per diamond. And we need 27 diamond pickaxes, since one pickaxe mines an average of 1 bedrock chunk before breaking, and 27 of these chunks make the bedrock pickaxe. Meaning we need about 18,000 coal. But it isn't as bad as it looks. It is time to do the calculus. According to binomial distribution calculationization mathematical, a diamond pickaxe mines about 160 coal and 15 diamond nuggies in its lifetime, meaning that a diamond pickaxe mines the equivalent of 0.75 diamond pickaxes in its lifetime. That means we only need about 4,000 coal to fill in the other 25%. But that does not mean we need to create 60 dash pickaxes to mine all this coal. Because I found a shortcut after some time of looking through coal recipe. And I have concluded that you can just use this moderately complicated process to turn wood into coal into coke. So we just need 4,000 wood. Therefore, it was time to go foraging. I needed a lot of space to plant the tree farm, and what better place to forage than the maximum compact machine in the compactor. After making about 20 steel axes, planting a forest, destroying the forest, and repeating step 3 to 4, 100 times, and dumping 4,500 logs into the coke making chain. Now, we wait for all of it to process. Now that we have painfully created 4,500 coke balls, it was time to do the almost equally long process of crushing and compressing 4,500 coke. Now we wait again. Finally, we now have the materials to make a few starting diamond pickaxes. After plugging in the compactor to the reactor and stuffing these 550 hop ingots right into the compactor to get 187 diamond nuggies and stuffing these nuggets back into the machine to get 22 diamonds, I obtained 7 diamond pickaxes. Now we are talking. Except instead of talking, it was time to auto-click these 6 diamond pickaxes to the death. After collecting the diamond nuggets and coal from these pickaxes, compressing them, processing them more, compacting them, making the second generation of pickaxes, breaking them, and repeating the pickaxe cycle of life, I eventually went through 27 diamond pickaxes and got 27 bedrock pieces, among the truckloads of shiny powder byproducts. After creating 3 bedrock blocks by bottlenecking all the energy in these energy cubes I created about 5 seconds ago, releasing the 27 bedrock popcorn pieces into the thingy, and blasting the compactor with short but powerful pulses of energy, I did it. The bedrock was mine. The last thing to do was to make 2 final diamonds for the bedrock pickaxe handle, which I did as well. With this bedrock pickaxe in my hand, it now was time to make the grand escape. Now I do realize that this entire playthrough is extremely unoptimized and that, looking back, there are several methods I should have used that I did not realize because I am not a modded genius. Some of them include, using the refined storage mod. Using automation which basically comes from refined storage mod. Number 3. Using this complicated sounding upgrade to repair pickaxes, which makes it unnecessary to create 27 diamond pickaxes. And many more. In other words, I have been doing the painful way of beating this game. For the pro way of beating this, search up a compact claustrophobia series from anyone whose name starts with a G and take notes. Or if you're only interested in seeing my POV, check out the first half of this playthrough. Anyways, if you want to play this yourself, the download link is in the description. And as always, shout out to the channel members.